This podcast is made possible by our patrons at patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. As this new season, exciting new season of Bonfireside Chat starts, I just want to give a quick shout out to everybody who has decided to support us. It's a huge deal. It's the reason why the shows can sound as good as they do. It's the reason why we have PS4s in order to play Bloodborne and bring this to you. Really appreciate it. So thank you to all of our patrons at patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv.
Some of our landings were desperate adventures. We are now prepared to meet the inevitable counterattacks with power and with confidence.
Hello, good hunter. I am a doll, here in this dream to look after you. Honorable hunter, pursue the echoes of blood, and I will channel them into your strength. You will hunt beasts, and I will be here for you to embolden your sickly spirit.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
And you're listening to a very special episode of Bonfireside Chat. It is a bestial favorite.
Yes, it is very special because we are beginning our Bloodborne coverage in earnest, right? That's where
Yes.
we're talking about.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, but we're completing it in earnest accents. So that's the thing. You guys wanted us to do this. Well, fuck you. We're doing the whole thing as Jim Varney.
Yeah, I'm going to be Jim Varney from Toy Story, a little bit
Totally
gravelier.
Annihilate. Yeah.
Yeah, 20 more years of smoking on top of that. Yeah.
Yeah, like evil Ernest from Ernest Goes to Prison.
Yeah. Ernest Scared Stupid had Eartha Kitt in it.
Ooh, la la, daddy.
know, right?
Anywho, yeah, Bloodborne.
Bloodborne.
Yeah, super exciting. Like, we're excited, and thank you guys for your patience. I take it back earlier when I said "fuck you." I didn't mean it.
Come back, baby. I didn't mean it.
Come back, baby.
Yeah.
So like every first episode we do when we cover a new Souls game, we're gonna go over some basics and what things are different. Thank you for allowing us that week to really suss these out, and we did need it. And then next week we start with guests and everything. But right now it's Solo Bolo, tutorial area, and the kind of differences, key points, Bloodborne 101.
Correct.
And yeah, cool. Get us started.
Yeah, so I want to get the first one out of the way. Even though Dark Souls and Demon Souls were Dungeons and Dragons-esque medieval fantasy stories, even though they were dark fantasy and grim as hell, this one is a straight-up horror story, right? And in fact, it's a tour of a bunch of different horror genres.
It is specifically like gothic horror making way into Lovecraftian horror. And I can say that, I've been thinking about it, and I've seen this sentiment around a couple times, but at first when I saw it, I was like, bleh. But I've been thinking about it, and this is secretly, like, From Software, my favorite video game company, went and made the best Lovecraft game.
Oh, yeah.
And to let you guys know and remind you, we live in a world with, like, eternal darkness and amnesia. Those both exist still.
Yeah.
And I love Dark Corners of the Earth. This is the best Lovecraft game. Like, this is the best expression of that kind of horror. One of the only expressions of like that gothic Victorian horror, that I can kind of see in games, other than say like Nightmare Creatures. But like the absolute best of like a handful of games that have done Lovecraft really, really well.
Right. And for any new listeners, people who are just now finding the network because of Bloodborne coverage, welcome. Thank you so much for checking us out.
Yeah.
We love us some Lovecraft.
It is so, I was so, when I figured that out, because the kind of like, there's hints at it forever, so it's not really a spoiler. And we'll talk about our spoiler policy when we get into the actual meat of the game, but like, it's not really a spoiler to say that happens. But keep in mind, and I was kind of like, bragging is the wrong word because it didn't require anything on my part, but like, I made a very concentrated effort not to know anything about this game going into it, and then to have it be such a thing that is made for me was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like that was like when that stuff started happening, like I was just like, oh shit. And then now that I've been like, did my post game, like, looking around the internet, reading IM descriptions, matching things together, stuff like that. Like it is a real oh shit kind of thing for me. That exposition is the same, but I also think as kind of a general thing is that like the story I think is a little bit more straightforward than the last few games.
Yeah.
on whole.
There are fewer apparent moving parts, and there are like broader theories about kind of the cosmology of this, and it gets into some very surreal stuff. It starts out, we'll get to a description of that opening cutscene, but everything is called into question: the authenticity, the what is awake and what is dreaming, and all of that. But it's simple kind of to a fault, because there's very little direct motivation that it's giving you other than a couple of specific verbs.
Yeah, and that's kind of it does feel, and this is getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but part of it is like, Kole and I haven't actually just sat down and talked the shit about Bloodborne all that much. But there is part of me feels like that sense is so strong at the beginning and fades as the game goes on, that I'm not convinced that we aren't dealing with a kind of like a bait and switch, or an intentional, like, here's this, bam, you thought this, but you're wrong. Here's the real shit. In talking about it without actually using any specifics, but we'll talk about it at length. And it is, and it earns it. Like both things, like it could either just be like, oh, wishy-washy, and not be anything, or it could be this kind of trick. And both cases, I feel like it's earned.
Yeah.
It does a really, really good job with that. Yeah. Further, layouts and lamps. So shortcuts are back. We had those a little bit in Dark Souls 2, but they're really important here. And the hub and spoke system is pretty much gone. This is a more concentrated area, and the zone connections are very considered and concrete. You can also no longer warp between things. So you have your like home zone that you always constantly have to go to, that acts as kind of a hub, but you can no longer warp between bonfires or anything like that. Like it is just a world, and you're in it, and it's up to you to traverse from one end to the other, more or less.
Right. So for anybody who has played Demon's Souls, this hub world acts very much like the Nexus, right?
Yeah.
Except you can go to, there's a higher level of granularity to the places that you're going to be warping between.
Yep, and they're just more connected. Like it's like the Demon Souls, if you could walk from Boletaria to Stonefang, and the and bonfires are the equivalent. They're lamps now. We will end up calling them bonfires. We'll also end up saying souls a lot, even though they're blood echoes. But lamps are very much more few and far between. So Dark Souls 2, sprinkled those throughout like very liberally, in ways that work to its, detriment for the most part, and then some areas to its benefit, I think. Yeah. But, probably mostly not to its benefit. Here, that is not the case at all. Like you have a palpable sense of relief when you find one, because they're pretty hard to find.
Right, and you're keeping your eye out. You have a huge sense of relief when you find those shortcuts as well, because that is a big part of the way that this handles checkpointing. Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So fewer safe zones, fewer kind of like ripcords that you can pull, and definitely a longer trek in between safe places, which is a big problem if you're used to the pace of the previous games, because the combat here is faster and more brutal. Especially in the beginning, enemy placement and encounter design are such that you're going to be facing a lot of very aggressive enemies at the same time. And you don't really have as much of a defensive vocabulary, insofar as you can't hide behind a shield in order to kind of soak some of the damage into your endurance. Instead, you are focusing more on being able to dodge attacks as they come in, or do things called visceral attacks. Everything just is much more quick in the moment, but you're still kind of asked to plan your the way you approach different encounters just as much as you did in Dark Souls 1 and 2.
Yes, and I think this is the single biggest difference as far as mechanically how this goes. This game feels worlds apart to me. Like it is clearly a Souls game. Like you are still managing an endurance meter and attacking and everything, and you still have this dodge roll, and it's actually like kind of a dodge sidestep now, which is really cool. You don't lose your ability to attack quite as quick. But this makes such a big difference, and everything from how enemies are designed. And again, like I think this mostly hits. I think almost all the enemies work with this. I think the points in which it doesn't, there's some kind of holdover enemies that feel like real stress points. To me, and we'll talk about those as they show up. But for the most part, it's really successful and ambitious to take this, this game that there are differences between Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, and Dark Souls 2, but they are so similar in comparison to this. And for them to just kind of totally I'm taking a plane break here. For them to just totally throw that out and create what feels like a real new combat system. It just really, really pretty impressive.
One of the bigger changes, and we're going to talk about the differences in available builds and things like that. Even though this is a game that has guns, you're pretty much always going to be holding one unless there's a particular other item that you're going to be using two-handed or holding a torch. There's really no way to do ranged combat out the gate. Whereas new players could probably take solace in the Royal or in the Sorcerer, right? Using that as a way to dodge, a way to ease themselves in. And as it stands, you're kind of always going to be up in the scrum.
Right. And this has a huge effect, on the game as far as you have no choice, at least initially, but to get in there. And that is, those enemies where it doesn't work as well, come later. And you can tell that the very beginning of this game, the part we're going to talk about a little bit today, but mostly next episode, are made to teach you this. Shit got real. There's one weird thing is that there's not a diegetic explanation for a lack of shields or why guns don't do damage. There's a couple notes about tradition on the gear things, but I kept expecting there to be some reason why no one would pick up a piece of metal. But it's just not the case.
What's funny is that your enemies do it, but their shields are far more effective than yours.
Well, or they're just super shitty. You can get one shield in the game, but it's absolute garbage and it's there to make fun of you. And that's the shield your enemies have, and you can usually break through that with one thing. But there's a kind of a host of smaller changes here. Enemies stagger really easily. The regain system. Do you have that elsewhere in the notes? Or
that plays into the next point, the healing.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah. It kind of transitions into the combat though, because it's going to affect how you attack and how you engage with enemies. But let's talk about healing.
Yeah, so instead of having an Estus flask or items that you can pick up the healing spices, you have blood vials, right, that you are relying on. And this is kind of a point of concern, I think, for both Gary and myself.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I don't dig this very much. It is you have 20, you start out with 20 and it's always refilled to 20, which is more than you ever have in any other games.
It's refilled to 20 as long as you have some in your storage.
Yes. Yeah. It's not you start out with 20 is what I actually think I meant to say. But they are finite. So you can potentially have to farm for them. The logic behind this is probably to encourage you to use this regain system. Right. When you get hit, you have lost temporary health at first. And if you attack an enemy in between, you can fill that bar up, or a certain section of your bar can be refilled. At first, it was I don't know if you had this experience too, but I thought oh, the person who hurt me, I have to hurt them.
Me too.
But it's really anybody.
Yeah.
Just go attack anybody and it's just as good. So you can kind of heal yourself in the middle of combat, which plays into this more aggressive style that they want, the shieldless style.
Soaking a single hit is not as momentous as it was in Dark Souls, where the health was gone, right? Well, it is encouraging you to attack as much as possible in order to kind of hold on by a thread.
It's not momentous as long as you get that regain in.
Right.
And there are enemies where you can't do that later, which we'll talk about. There are a lot of enemies that grab you in this game. And that's a bummer because it undermines one of the most powerful systems in the game. But this health thing, I can't think of a good reason for it.
Yeah.
Why it doesn't just refill to 20.
Yeah.
The idea is you pick up more, so you kind of replenish as you go, which is great.
Yeah.
But it should just read, because all it does is rob me of my time.
Yeah. The problem is that this punishes a series of bad runs in a way that the always refilling Estus flask did not. You're always going to have a baseline number of heals that you could count on.
You never get to my favorite point in a Souls game, which is the nothing to lose point, where you can just keep trying wild shit until something works. And you can't do that because you're probably going to end up using blood vials to try that shit. And eventually you have to take a break from this area, go somewhere else. And the only thing I can think of is one, just to encourage you to do regain, but two, to, do something with pacing. But that kind of falls out the window with a technical thing we're not going to talk about too much because everyone else is and because it'll be fixed. But the load times are really atrocious. Yeah. So when asking me to head back to my hub world, go to an area to farm, make 3 or 4 farming runs, and then go back to the area I'm working on, involves 8 load screens. 8 or 9 load screens, each of which is like 30 seconds long.
Yeah.
So it is asking a lot. And I can't see the strength of that system. So this is one of this is a Bloodborne bummer.
Yeah.
Amidst a lot of wonderful things.
And I can hear listeners saying, well, these guys are just babies who didn't understand the system. Trust me, we're factoring that in to this, to this reading.
I'm not I understand the system great. I was by 10 or 20 hours into the game, I felt like I was playing it the way it was meant to be played.
Yeah.
There's just at that second half of the game, they start ramping in those enemies and mechanics that undermine the system they set up, like the things that you can't do regain with, like the grab enemies or frenzy, which we'll talk about, which there's no regaining to be done. So I was doing regaining like crazy, but it didn't work.
Which is what I mean when I say we're factoring that in. I think the biggest problem is it feels disrespectful of our time in a way that doesn't buy anything useful with what it costs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And again, this is one of very few Bloodborne bummers. Go back to me gushing about the tone if this sounds too negative. So death and bloodstains work similarly. When you die, you return to your lamp. However, your bloodstain can be picked up by wandering enemies.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just there waiting. It will always just be there waiting in a boss arena. But otherwise, like a crow or a guy can just kind of grab it and walk around.
Yeah, and that's a big deal because you have a lot more wandering enemies in this game. In certain areas than you would in other places. So, this is even more like playing horse with yourself than before, specifically because if you died to an enemy, it's likely that they're going to pick that up and you have to now kill him to get it back, as opposed to rushing up, grabbing it, and then fleeing in order to get those back.
Yeah, and this isn't a Bloodborne bummer. Nope. I kind of dug this, and I like it as a story thing, or just like the idea somebody picked up this, hey, this is cool. Blood. I like blood.
The moment that I realized what was happening, it took me a couple of deaths in order to figure it out. Why these certain enemies had purple eyes, and because some enemies have multiple eyes, it gets even freakier when they get them.
Yeah, some tigers have multiple eyes.
Yes,
and some tigers have blue eyes.
Yeah. Once you figure that out and realize what's happening, then it ceases to be a bummer, and it becomes a real kind of aha moment.
Yeah, and kind of a cool hunt. So enemies, mini bosses, bosses, enemies will no longer despawn like they do in Dark Souls 2. There are also more mini bosses in this game, which are kind of like hunters, and they feel different than NPC invaders from previous games because they're significantly tougher.
Exactly. They share similar move sets to you. They're using similar items. They'll have guns and things like that. But because of kind of how wildly different your equipment, how much of an effect your equipment has on your play style, they all feel like their own kind of designed and considered encounters in a way that even goes beyond the designed and considered encounters of the invaders. Yeah,
and they're really fun to fight. So they're varied extremely, and bosses are really varied.
Yes.
Maybe not the most varied in the whole series, I think, but more varied than Dark Souls 2.
Right.
So and in a way that I really like too. So
yeah. Something that kind of plays into invasions, like we said, there is insight, right? And this is this is one of my favorite systems in the game, honestly. It's a big mystery. Again, like Gary, I knew nothing about this game really coming into it. So trying to figure out what this does and the effects that it has on the game. There's a lot to this. In a basic way, it kind of replaces humanity from Dark Souls. So this is kind of a consumable. You don't lose it upon death. You can kind of accumulate this and roll around with a big store, which actually has an effect on the world, like world tendency from Demon Souls. They're very subtle and sometimes very obvious ways that this can change things. Yeah,
and for the most part, to be more difficult. So it is like having a darker world tendency in Demon Souls. It is, if you have played the Call of Cthulhu tabletop game, it's a Cthulhu mythos score. So it is a hard limit on your sanity. The more of this you have, the more of the world you see. And it says this in the item, that you use to get at the former humanity, or
Madman's knowledge.
Madman's knowledge. Or Stone of Ephemeral Eyes, or any I guess Stone of Ephemeral Eyes. That's kind of sounds like a similar thing. I didn't put that together. So there's just a lot of things this does. You spend it to summon help. You get it for succeeding. And one of the neat things about it is you don't just get it for beating bosses or for using that consumable items. It plays in that learning thing. So you get it for seeing bosses for the first time. You get it NPCs if they talk about some of the more cosmic shit. That will give you insight. It's really cool. There's one, it's not really in the notes and it doesn't show up until a little bit later in the game. The way this interacts with Frenzy, I hate. I hate Frenzy. I hate it more than I hate the blood vial system. I really think it's a bad mechanic. And the way this interacts with it is a real missed opportunity, but we'll talk about that in like 3 months, so. Yeah. But Insight is super, super fucking cool. And you can also spend it as a currency. There's a merchant you run into that will just take your Insight from you.
In exchange for goods and services.
Exactly. Insight can be
like that's a way that you can buy kind of like special gear, right? Like the armor sets of some of the people that you fight, which plays into a pretty big change that I think is going to have impact on kind of the meta of Bloodborne versus the others. Gear and leveling, both of which are much, much more simple. There are fewer stats, right? Only 6 ones that you can touch, as opposed to double digits in Dark Souls 1 and 2. And this has an effect, really just in determining a handful of weapons that you use and their scaling and stuff like that. But the bigger impact is made by which trick weapon you decide to roll with.
Yeah, like every Dark Souls game, you are building towards a weapon type. But that's what we always used to say. But in previous Dark Souls games, we didn't really realize you're also building to be able to use all of your gear. You're building to be able to wear the armor you want to wear. You're building to want to be able to cast the spells that you want to cast with the right cast speed that you want. A lot of those considerations have been erased in exchange for this really, really stripped down thing where, like, essentially once you have the stuff to equip the weapon you want, it's just endurance and health. And the soft caps on those are much lower than they were in previous games. This reverberates throughout the entire way you play the game, though. So, like, level ups cost a lot in this game, like significantly more. Bosses seem to drop fewer souls. Often in this game, I would struggle against the boss, finally beat them, and have enough souls to level up once. Or sometimes not even that. A little bit later in the game, and the getting rid of those kind of gear types, and they've totally eliminated miracles and pyromancies, and taken magic and introduces it halfway through the game and makes it very limited and situational. So there are so few builds in this game that I can think of, and in looking online, like that was a big part of old games. And it's also like, if you go back to one of the Recycle Bin podcasts, like did like a little segment on that where we talked about our favorite thing about Dark Souls in anticipation of Dark Souls 2. And like, it's one of my favorite things about Dark Souls games is that they're infinitely replayable to me. I had a lot of fun in Dark Souls 1. Like, I'm only going to cast spells at things. Right. And it changed the way I play the game entirely. This game doesn't do that. It has a way that it wants you to play and makes it so you have to, it feels like. By getting rid of those options. No range combat, no spells, no kind of heavy builds. It's essentially like you are forced to either play like a naked guy with a club or a like thiefy dex guy. And those are the things you can do. And it's kind of a bummer. Like I dislike this as a thing. Yeah, I think
it definitely reduces the possible options and the complexity here. So, sometimes for the better, right? Like, this gets rid of equip burden, right? But that also trivializes armor, right? It's more for like fashion souls.
Which is cool. Like, I like fashion souls, but even initially, like the fact that you have fewer kind of equipment choices in general means that there are fewer fashion souls options for clothing or for just weapons, because weapons are part of fashion souls. And it also changes rewards based on like if you're exploring. So like if you're exploring the game, when you find things in this game, they tend to be consumables. But like going through and finding a hard to get place and finding a cool weapon felt a little bit better to me than finding like a single madman's knowledge than it does in this game. Like, you find consumables and hidden stuff because you go a really long time in the game without finding any equipment. The first set of armor you can find is past the first boss. The first weapon is a bit further than that. So it is a change that I'm not necessarily on board with. the actual play and the way that the weapons that they've introduced play or the way they control are all very different and awesome.
Yeah.
So like I actually like the weapons themselves quite a bit.
Definitely. And so you're trading off this kind of like macro strategy of like, this is what my build is going to be about, in favor of kind of more tactical versatility, because these, trick weapons articulate quite literally most times into kind of being these two different weapons, two different move sets that you can switch between, not at random, but very rapidly. Just depending on the situation at hand. And so picking which one of those you're going to go with is a relatively big choice, especially at the beginning, when you know that it's going to be several hours before you get another one of these that's going to be not just viable, but markedly
even
different.
Available.
Yeah.
And well, then that's the thing too, is you don't know that. Or I didn't know it going into the game, but you know it now that you're listening to this. If you're listening to this before you play Bloodborne, which you shouldn't do, you should play along with us. But the you're making that choice and you don't know how important it's going to be. So even if you just pick a starter weapon that you end up not caring for, like that's kind of it for you for quite a while. It's interesting because the differences between the weapons, it's a wider gulf, which I think is a positive thing, but it leaves behind some of the weird little intricacies that I appreciated. Like there's less room for like weirdness. Like this sword controls very similar to this sword, but has a slightly different R2. And when you backstab people, it heals you, or like, or there are no weapons that do like a special, or there are very few. There are a couple that do like a special thing, like the way boss weapons did kind of magic attacks and AoEs and things like that.
Yeah.
Buffs. There's not room for that stuff anymore, which does make it feel a little bit less, which it should. It's more of a grounded game, but it makes it feel a little bit less fantastical or like you found a cool thing, at least to me.
Yeah. Kind of the big side effect of the fact that you're not finding an awful lot of unique gear or drops in the world is it's kind of harder to read the tea leaves and imply story from the environment in a way that we often like to do, and haven't really been able to do that successfully for a little while. So, each of these items is going to have the same description. It's going to reveal less about the areas that you're in and the people that lived there or who might have fallen. In this place.
Exactly. Yeah, there was a lot to just finding a weapon and learning about the person who used it in previous games, and that doesn't happen here. Or like if I just find like, oh, it's a saw spear. Why is this here? I don't know. Hunter dropped it. Like there's no, it's not like, oh, this is this person's specific. Like this is Tarkus's armor. And that means, like there's none of that. So it does feel like a reduction while simultaneously being, really awesome to play with, and they all control really well. The biggest area that's going to have an impact, and I'm really curious to see how this goes, is in PvP. Yeah. Where like there are so few builds that the PvP scene, I don't even know what it's going to look like here. And I don't want to pretend like that's my thing. Like I don't know, and I also only care in a limited amount. But I could see it being a bummer for people. Yeah. Like the fact that like, oh, okay, there's only a couple of different builds, and everyone has to use one of 5 builds and one of 15 weapons. Yeah.
So this is probably going to be, if my prediction is right, or I'll make it right now, primarily a PvE kind of experience, especially because Invasion is kind of hidden so late.
Yeah. Like the actual invading mechanics aren't hidden that, but I never got invaded, or I got invaded once. Yeah. In this game is very rare.
Something else that
server stuff.
Yeah. Something else that affects, you can no longer imbue items with effects. Upgrading is a linear path. You're kind of taking solidified blood and taking it from +1 to +10.
You can through runes. Like there are runes that add effects.
Yes.
So you can't do it through just like straight up upgrading, but there is this rune thing that allows you to do. But then that gets weirdly straight up like World of Warcraft, Diablo. Like
it's perks.
Yeah, it's like 0.7 blunt damage, 0.02 slashing damage, plus 0.1 fire damage. Like that gets really kind of boring in a way that like there's no reason not just to put on your best damage runes.
Yeah,
at least it felt like to me. Maybe that's not the case. Yeah. But it is way simpler though, and in a way, again, that's a plus because you don't run into like trying to find pure blade stones, which is a pain in the ass. But it is again, it's just this weird reduction. It's like, which sometimes can work, but sometimes you end up with like a machine for pigs.
Yeah,
Where like let's just take everything about the original and get rid of it. You know.
And on the fly correction here, you're thinking of the gemstones actually that you socket in and imbue the
Oh,
items
you're right.
with different effects. The runes are perks. Like you find
Yeah,
these and
the runes are rings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. I meant gemstones.
Yeah, and there is magic here, which I didn't realize until after I beat the game. So it is incredibly well hidden, especially because there's really no reason to upgrade your arcane stat aside from item discovery.
Yeah. Or if you're building towards something because you know it's there, but you don't know that, you won't know that initially.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird. Like I think there is an arcade build in there. I think there's a blood tinge build in there in this game, but they're just hidden.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. Speaking of hidden, NPCs and quest lines. So these feel more convoluted than previous games.
And remember, the previous games had Siegfried or whatever. Sigmire.
Yeah, Sigmire.
Yeah.
This is, there are fewer of these. There are fewer NPCs. And there are fewer of them that have developed quests, but a lot of the little one-off NPCs that just give you flavor text tie into the quests. Most of them do.
Yeah.
Where you literally just like send people to safety. There are a couple of NPCs that actually have developed quest lines to them, but not very many.
Right. And that is something that I'm going to have to really take advantage of on these subsequent playthroughs because I didn't really see a lot of that in the first go through. It took me a while to even realize that, especially in the more populated areas, they're hiding behind doors. So they're not even like standing out in plain sight. They're often by these pink lanterns that are kind of like blend in. They blend into the scenery.
Burners.
What's that?
Yeah. They're incense burners.
Oh, yeah.
The ones on the ground, they keep beast away.
Sensors, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so there's a little bit, again, just in the less is more or less is less section of this. There are fewer of these. The actual NPCs that are there, though, are more satisfying than, say, like Cloran, or something like that. Like, the stories that I've found have been really cool. There's just not very many of them.
Yeah, and the stories that I've read about, too,
Yeah,
after the fact.
exactly.
Yeah. So, and there's a little bit more room for choice in these as well. There are different ways that they can shake out that makes me very excited about the stuff that's going to arise from the community. I mean, if you're listening to this, well after the fact, we're recording it, not immediately after the game came out, but people are still figuring things out. Like the official guide hasn't even dropped yet.
Yeah, which I can't wait to read the in-universe enemy descriptions. That's going to be huge for me.
Yeah.
Speaking of, again, just kind of a reduction, covenants are not really a thing anymore.
Nope.
There are 3 now. They're dedicated to different flavors of PvP. You will likely go through the whole game without running into them. I ran into one naturally and looked up the other 2.
Right.
They are superfluous and weird kind of vestigial characteristics.
It's
of
more
just it being a Souls game.
It's more of a way for you to kind of restrict the kind of people that you're going to fight. Specifically,
Senpai restrict my PvP.
Yeah. But it's a way for you to kind of pick a team.
Yeah. And by pursuing these, you are naturally going to find those NPC quest lines that we talked about. Like, you have to do that to get these. So that's useful. But it's weird. Like, I just kept expecting there to be more of them because that's such again, like when it sounds like we're harping on things that they're taking out, part of the reason is it wasn't like the Dragon Covenant in Dark Souls 1 was awesome. What it was the existence of which and going down and finding the Lord and kind of thinking of the implications for that covenant were cool. It wasn't like the practice was that cool.
Yeah.
It was just the kind of lore and the storytelling opportunities that came with it. Like, the Princess Guard wasn't cool, but if it wasn't for the Princess Guard, like, those are miracles that are exclusive to the mimosas that are being drunk in Seath's brunch. It's been a while since I played that game, but like that's why we know about those is because of those miracles.
Right. Which isn't to say that the covenants that are there don't have their cool little beats to them. The fact that there are fewer of them and they are kind of willfully hidden from view means that there's less opportunity to kind of get that insight. Yeah.
It's a double-edged kind of thing. The ones that are there, I think, are super cool. What's kind of weird is so my wiki of choice, Wikidot, has been slower to get on the Bloodborne tip, and that's probably because they do their job and they're really fastidious. My weekend wiki, my little piece on the side, Fextra Life, which I don't even like saying.
Yeah, it's gotten better. It's gotten better since the Dark Souls 2 days, honestly.
It has. Yeah, it definitely has. And it's also kind of the only game in town for some of this stuff. They, in an early on thing, they were talking about covenants. They had like 9 of them listed that had names that were really evocative. And it made me think if it was like a Nintendo, like Uncle from Nintendo thing.
Yeah.
Or if they were planned, like they were from early, information and they got cut. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
But
and what's sad is that's going to just get thrown down the memory hole.
Yeah.
Like any of those names could have been like really evocative and cool and just like, oh, let me roll that around in my head for a little while. But as they winnow down to the 3 that we know of, like, right, who knows what's
there still could be, there definitely still could be things, and especially like Insight specifically. But I think that we did take this extra week to get a little bit more familiar with the game, but this stuff could change.
Yeah. So this is kind of a snapshot of the like what 90% of this game is.
Yeah, or at least what we understand. Chalice dungeons are a thing now. So these are bonus dungeons that are accessible from the hub world. You find items in the main quest and find either consumables or actually like, kind of capital I items that unlock them. And they kind of feed on each other. Like you go into a dungeon to find items to unlock more dungeons, There are story dungeons that are static and actually do play in to the plot of Bloodborne. Root dungeons, which are procedurally generated. So it is like a Binding of Isaac seed for a dungeon. And then there are also defiled dungeons, which are dungeons that are like super challenge dungeons. So those are meant to be, you essentially spend the whole time cursed in them.
Yeah.
And these get really difficult. They're independent of the new game cycle, which makes me think that they're meant to be played over the course of several games.
Right. Yeah.
The kind of full story.
I was very surprised that there was a canonical version of these spots, because the pre-release marketing that really played these Chalice dungeons up as a key differentiator for this game versus the others really leaned into the random side of it. So that means that we can effectively cover these for the show, as opposed to
like doing one episode on a couple things that show up in the seeds we played respectively.
Imagine if it was just random. It would be like us describing our dreams to each other.
It'd be a nightmare. And all the entertainment that comes with, nothing like hearing a dream described. What happens to a dream described? Does it shrivel up? So essentially, like, if that happened, it would kind of be like infinite Dark Bloodborne, which it kind of is now. But I can see them getting really boring really quick.
Yeah.
Even the main story ones, like, they are combat challenges. Like, there's some neat set pieces and stuff, but it's not as well designed. What's kind of cool is there are unique bosses, and again, it does play into the story. So we will be covering Chalice dungeons.
Yeah. And they
a little bit later in the season.
Yeah, they're worth dipping into. I was initially skeptical of it, but there is stuff there, even if it is not as immediately aesthetically rewarding as the bespoke content that makes up the main body.
Yeah,
of the game.
It's not the A game. Like it is a little bit of a diversionary.
It's the C game for Chalice.
Yes, the B game for Bloodborne, the A game for A Train. Now on IBM PCs. Yeah. And then there are a couple of things we still couldn't get totally into. As we mentioned, Insight I think it's going to have more effects than we think. Somebody released a really cool video I put on Facebook, and it has some kind of spoilerness to it. So don't necessarily watch it, but it shows a way that an enemy changes at a certain Insight marker, and it's very cool. Yeah. It's something that's easy to miss if you're playing, but it's pretty cool. And I said this on Facebook, but I want to be learning things about Insight a year from now.
Yeah.
Like, I want someone to be, oh shit, like if you get 99 insight, which is really hard to do, but you get to this early place with 99 insight, like this happens.
Yeah. Like this, it's nice that it's measurable too.
Yeah.
But right now we understand the effect to be global weirding, right? It just makes everything a little bit more heightened. But there are specific ways that articulates, and that is one of many complications for how we're going to structure this season. Because do we talk about the way that an area changed with high insight? During the main episode, right? Yeah,
especially since, at this point, like, you maybe haven't gotten there. So we're going to talk about spoilers, again, like right after this section. But one last little thing, Beast Mode, which is so for a game ostensibly about werewolves, it's not about werewolves. you'd expect to have a little of that play a little bit more into it and turn to a werewolf. And the answer is you can, but it is so hidden and obscure and situational that you won't.
Right.
So what we understand about this, there's one weapon that you can find that will turn you into kind of a beast mode. You have a beasthood stat that is inverse to your insight stat. So the higher your insight, the lower your beast mode stat. And what that actually, it's like a rage meter. Like if you fill that up, then the higher that goes, the more, or the higher your stat is. If you filled up your meter, the more damage you do, but the lower your defense is. And right now, it is that weapon is the only thing that triggers beast mode reliably. There are pellets you can find and eat that will give you a meter to fill up, but you'll probably won't be able to do it in time. And that's all there is really to it. There's like a weapon. There's one weapon that's hard to find that turns you into a werewolf.
Yeah.
So
we now have to pay Marshawn Lynch thousands of dollars for saying beast mode so many times.
Yeah. Is he one of the founding hip hop members of the Beast Mode Squad?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And their hit single "Claws for Alarm."
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. No, he's a sportsman for the Seahawks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. I didn't want to ask because I didn't want to sound like I didn't know.
Well, instead you just left me to like condescend to you and explain a sports thing.
No. I needed to be condescended to. Sometimes you need it. So it's not everything. It's not remotely everything, but those are all the differences.
Season over.
Yeah, big ones. See you guys in blood death. So let's talk about what we're going to do about spoilers.
We haven't had a conversation about this ahead of time, so I hope we're on the same page.
I think we'll do it the same way we did other seasons. Like at a certain point, all bets will be off. We should say that the game is all of the middle of the game is more or less nonlinear.
Right.
So as a general rule, if you haven't played an area and you don't want to learn about it, don't listen to the episode. We'll do our best not to talk about things that happen in the future.
Yeah, we won't cross-contaminate.
Yep. Until that kind of midway point where everything kind of opens up, and in order to conjecture on what's happening, we'll have to talk about a little bit about what comes later, but we'll say that out loud.
Yeah, we will give ample warning if there's going to be an egregious point of view. But if you listen to any of our coverage of these games before they come out, you know that there is very little, because we really value ourselves personally the experience of approaching these kind of unsullied and kind of unprimed. So it is something that we definitely want to preserve for you if you are experiencing this for the first time. Keep an eye out for the area names, and that should be a pretty good guide for you.
Yeah. Yep. So then that's more or less it. If we do end up slipping up and saying something that you consider a spoiler, like spoilers are so dumb in the internet age, like it is such a nebulous definition. And something that somebody considers to be a spoiler, somebody else might not. Like, I didn't watch any footage of this. There are people who probably watch streams of it, and we might say something and they'll be like, spoiler. And it's like, well, you watched the game before you even got a chance to touch it, So people consider the spoilers different things. But if we do accidentally slip up, we apologize. It's not intentional. We're not setting out to ruin the game for anybody.
Right. And this is cold comfort. But if we make some kind of offhanded allusion to something that comes a little bit later, chances are by the time you get to it, you will have forgotten about it.
Yeah. Yep. Also, if you are somebody, so since this is a PS4 exclusive, if you're not going to, if you don't have a PS4, which like I don't blame you if you don't, and you're kind of experiencing the season vicariously, I don't think it is obviously not the best way to experience it, but I think it'll still be worth playing. If like you just listen to the show and then in a year you get a PS4, you'll still really like playing it because you'll probably discover things that we didn't discover. You'll have the kind of mechanical edge to it, and you'll actually see them rather than just hear like two chubby Midwestern depressives talk about it, which is the way to do it. Right. So, so in either way, even if there is like a little bit of a spoiler, if you get something you didn't, I don't think it's a big deal.
Yep.
So let's talk about what happens when you boot up the game. Let's talk about the cutscene.
You get a title screen. You can choose online mode or offline mode.
Yep, we're going through all of them. And then strangely enough, there's a continue option instead of just what does that mean? We're talking about once you hit start and you do the opening cutscene.
I could load the game, but are they building the meta structure of playing the game into the narrative?
Is this a game about the Metallica's classic load?
You see, the Navajo word for game actually shares a root with dream.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
And the Metallica album Load shares a name with the Metallica album Reload. So once you decided to put on your crown, King Nothing, you get this opening cutscene where you are in a gurney in a dark room, and an old man in a wheelchair kind of comes up to you and says, he is the blood minister.
That is what he is credited as.
Yeah. And he says, "Oh yes, pale blood."
In response to a question that you didn't ask, right? Like,
yes, or we weren't there to ask.
we were not privy to that to set up what it is. And immediately after that, we're looking at saying, like, you came to the right place. Yharnam is the home of blood ministration. You need only unravel its mystery, singular mystery.
Yeah, but there's actually other mysteries, which again, that is what lends me a little bit to believe that the kind of first half of this game is a little bit of a bait and switch in the best possible way. He says, "Where is an outsider like yourself to begin? Easy, with a bit of Yharnam blood of your own." And he leans in to give you this injection, and you see that his eyes are occluded, similar to the Candle Maiden.
Yeah,
which was the first thing I thought of.
Maiden in Black. Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of played into all those rumors that this was going to be the same world that Demon Souls was in. Now that I've played it, I don't think that's true.
Right.
But this was, since I was kind of going into it so blind, I was like, oh shit, like this is the Candle Maiden's great grandson.
Yeah.
Now he's got blood.
Yeah, that's the thing about Demon Souls. Nobody had any blood.
Yeah. Well, you didn't know.
Right. Wasn't as violent as this game. Dear God, is it violent?
Yeah, it is very violent.
Yeah.
So yeah, he injects us in with his occluded blood, and says before.
For first, you'll need a contract. Like, you're setting up for a transfusion in order to get this blood to kind of like naturalize you to the Yharnam experience.
Yes, he's about to, and he has to do this contract, which is your character creation. So you do your appearance, your name, and your background, which is essentially your class.
Your starting stats. It doesn't really affect equipment at all. We're going to get to that here in a second.
Yeah, the character creation is really robust and cool. You have a wide selection of pale waifs, like male or female pale waifs, but essentially pale waifs.
You can make a jaundiced waif.
Yeah, jaundiced waif. You can do a waif of color. You can do any number of tuberculosis suffering waifs.
Yeah. So. Well, they're also sickly. It's assumed that you're here because of some kind of an infection, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but never outright stated, but assumed.
And you can make the greatest monsters in this too. Like this is the most robust character creation engine they've had in this series. So you can make really, really scary things, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I love the descriptions on the backgrounds.
Yeah.
Like the deprived is the waste of skin. Like each of these gives just like a little bit of motivation for why you have the particular set of skills that you have.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can have glasses. Which I really dig.
You can also put on crazy steampunk goggles, which let's have a half-hour long conversation about whether this game is steampunk, Gary.
Yeah. or we could just have a half-hour long conversation about steampunk and why I don't like it. Why? And that's an Arcanum B-side for my blog at some point. But like, this is not steampunk, which is great. And even if it was, like, it wouldn't ruin it if like a big automaton like horse came out, Will Smith was riding it or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, I'd probably still be okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you say Spider Dicks?
Yeah. What's his name? That actor. He played
Kevin Kline?
No. Kevin Kline was the good guy. Kevin Kline's a national treasure. No,
Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah, Kenneth Branagh. Yeah, he played
AKA Spider Dicks.
Yep. No, he his whole thing was he got his dick cut off in the war, and that's his motivation. And at the end, he rides. He rides a mechanical spider that has like phalluses and stuff on it. It's crazy. Go back and watch Wild Wild West, Gary.
Oh boy, I knew that he rode a giant mechanical spider. I had no idea the status with regards to his dick.
Yep, he's called his name is Loveless.
Weird.
I know, right?
Wow.
No dick on that. Yes, this man in fact has no dick.
Yeah, and he's Kenneth Branagh.
Yep.
Of Shakespeare fame.
Yeah, like a legit actor, capital A.
Yeah, and he's like, well, listen, I know this is going to seem weird, but to play this giant spider mechanical villain, we have to have your backstory cut off your dick. Yeah. And he was just like, sign me up. I directed fucking, Hamlet. Yeah, okay. That's weird.
So yes, all steampunk, the main characters have no dicks.
That's probably
and
true.
The villains. The women, Gary, the women,
the
no dicks. No, the failed Gary. Shots fired.
Zing. No, I would never say somebody has no dick as an insult.
Right.
What a weird thing to say. Yeah. Who gives a shit if you had a dick?
Yeah. Well,
I go through so much of my life without thinking about my dick. Like I literally, this is the first time I thought about it today, and I've peed like twice, and this is the first time I've literally been like, oh yeah, I got a dick. Like it doesn't matter to me at all. Who are these people who just walk around thinking about their dicks?
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it.
Yeah, and anybody who's listening for the first time, this happens a lot.
Yeah, this is the kind of cock cast you're looking for. Bloodborne.
It's a podcast.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah.
So you sign your X on the line that is dotted, and the transfusion begins. Whatever happens, you may think it all to be a mere bad dream, setting this up to be a Lynchian exploration of what the meaning of reality is.
Yep, and he laughs. Like he seems like a real shithead. He seems sinister, and you awaken in a way that made me think of anesthesia paralysis.
Yeah,
you know, like you're awake but you can't do anything.
Like
you
that
can
Hayden
kind of
Christensen movie, Awake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Made me think of Awake. And it'd be amazing how often I go through a day without even thinking about Awake. Like this is literally the first time I thought about Awake today.
Yep. And I've got the poster above my bed. He's so dreamy.
Yeah. But yeah, he just left you there, and a pool of blood bubbles up from the floor, and a skinless blood werewolf.
Yeah. I thought about my dick here because I was rock hard at how awesome this was. This imagery is so great. Just like rising up from the floor as though this spilled blood created a portal to some kind of hellish netherworld where skinless wolfmen cavorted. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He looks really great. The interesting thing, though, is that he is scared off because somebody throws a Molotov at him. And I don't know who did that.
Nor do I. I thought that he just kind of like caught fire from proximity, and I've watched this opening cutscene several times.
I really thought somebody threw a Molotov because it's directional. Like it sets his right side on fire. Maybe it is proximity though.
Yeah, like it's the side that's reaching toward you. It's the claw, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that makes more sense than what I thought. But it really did feel like, it felt like that.
It's accompanied by a percussive sound too, and I could see that. The reason that I think that it's proximity is because right after this, the messengers show up.
Yeah,
and they are kind of seen as being these protector forces. You don't know that right now. Like you think out of the frying pan, adjacent to the fire, and then into the fire.
Yeah, these things look terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
These are great. I love the messengers.
Yeah, they end up being like the mascot for this game.
Yeah. So they crawl all over you, and eventually the screen fades to black, and you hear a female voice that says, you found yourself a hunter. This is the doll.
Yeah,
I'm 90% sure. And that actually makes sense now. So the blood you're getting in this cutscene, and you kind of getting, so the blood, that gives you your weird kind of semi-bestial powers.
Yeah.
What's happening though is that you're being drawn in this dream world, and you're being protected.
Right.
So these messengers are, sent from a character we're going to meet a little bit later this episode. And that's the person who's found themselves a hunter. So that all makes sense. That is what is protecting you from the beast. And that beast could not actually be a monster. It could also be the metaphorical, like actually succumbing to the beasthood that has taken over the entire town. Like it's your sentience.
Yeah, this could be like a Twilight hallucination.
Yes.
As it kind of claws in. Two things: the voice of the doll, the voice that you hear, is the maiden in black. That is the same voiceover. So that was the moment where I thought, wait a minute, is this Demon Souls? Even though they share voice actors. They have kind of, they're like Christopher Nolan. They have like a cast of 4 actors they use.
Yep.
And kind of secondarily, when you awake from this, you have the hunter's mark. Right.
Yes.
And also, you're in a world that has these messengers waiting around for you. So already the rules of what you would assume would be a normal reality are kind of slipping apart.
Oh shit! Hold on a second, Nicole. Sorry. Okay. I'm using my shitty PS4 earbud, and it fell out of my ear.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'll repeat a little bit of what I said.
Okay.
So you've got these messengers showing up, and already the rules of reality are kind of slipping apart.
Yes. Yeah. So you've been marked. This person that the doll says has found you, has marked you, and you wake up. You're not getting this kind of mythology,
right?
Or backstory to the game that you've got in all the other ones. This is just like you are a person, and now you're locked in a room, and all you know is that something about pale blood.
Yeah. This is not deductive, like like in ancient times there were these gods and whatever. Here's the way the mechanics of the world work, and then you go down to a room in a cell. This is inductive, where you're working from the small details out.
Yep. And you're in Iosefka's? Yosefka's clinic. This is an abandoned room in a clinic. It's dark. It is cluttered. It is super, gothic horror. Tons of little vials and syringes and such.
Yeah, you like any horror, like any good horror game. There's plenty of medical equipment lying around.
Yes, and there are messengers here, and this takes the place of soapstone messages. They are little, just kind of bubbling pools, and if you click on them, the messengers actually pop up, give you the message, and then kind of chuckle.
Yep. Yeah, they're also harder to see because they're in grayscale as opposed to the screaming orange. Something that I had to go back. I actually played the intro to this like 3 times tonight, something like that, to determine. You are going to sleep and waking up in the same place. The blood minister is gone. This is like you came to Yosefka's clinic, but there's no reason for us to believe that what we are seeing is the same version of this clinic that we walked into.
Yeah. Yep. And it's also what's kind of interesting about this, about the messengers being so harder to see, is that, and a couple of color choices with that grayscale made a huge difference for me. I don't think had to do with my colorblindness. Did you have a hard time finding your bloodstain?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a really hard time with it. That screaming orange was good. Like I liked that screaming orange. Like it didn't. Yeah. It wouldn't have fit in here, but like I had a hard time finding a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, the it ends up being like a small little purple geyser on the ground.
Yeah.
Whereas the bright green bloodstain, you could see that from across the map in Anne Orlando. You could see exactly where you died from pretty much a mile away.
Yeah.
So here that kind of makes retrieval, which depending on how much you lose and how much you're kind of still attached to it, which you're going to be because of how expensive things are. It definitely adds a little bit of complications, to the point where I was actually happy when an enemy picked up my bloodstain because I could actually see where it was, and I just had to kill him as opposed to walking around like I dropped my contact lens.
it makes going to a boss that you died to a real scramble too. Like, can I get to my bloodstain before this thing stun locks me and kills me before I get to it? As you kind of travel down the infirmary, there are tutorial texts here that are the messengers. And when you get into this larger infirmary full of gurneys and such, there is a huge werewolf mowing down on a guy.
Yeah.
And this is your asylum demon. Kind of initial.
Which is funny because he only has about a third of his health, but because you are completely unarmed, it's still likely that he's going to take you out. We had some respondents in the appendix episode say like, I took him out with just my bare hands, but it is quite likely, almost certain, that you're going to die here on your first go. And
what's a big bummer is you don't get anything for taking him out. No trophy, nothing mechanical. Like that's something we saw with the taking out the pursuer when he first shows up in Dark Souls 2. It's kind of a bummer. Like I wish that, like I liked it when From rewarded that stuff. But yeah, it's very likely he's going to kill you. If you don't decide to fight him, you can actually run past him and go to the next lamp and go to the Hunter's Dream that way. That's the speedrun tactic. But yeah, the Hunter's Dream. Once you die, you go back here, or if you go to the lamp, and this is our hub area.
Yeah, I love the way this is introduced. You come to, it fades up from black, and you kind of see a non-distinct shape figure off in the distance, and this kind of greenery in the foreground, and you slowly get up, and the thing in the distance comes into focus, this church-like building. And I didn't. It took longer than I'm willing to admit, specifically for me to figure out that this is the hub world. I thought that this was kind of like taking me to the actual world of the game, that there was going to be this verdant entrance to this terrible place of Yharnam.
Yeah, or that you were just going to spend time exploring this weird dream state.
Yeah, like this was going to be the actual tutorial, right? Like, this would be the version of the asylum.
Yeah, that's what I thought that for a moment too, and it's kind of enforced by the fact that you do find the doll here, but she doesn't talk to you. So like right in front of you, there is a real doll.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Slightly bigger than real life. Even the biggest female model is smaller than her. And boy, is this uncanny valley. If you look at her hands, it is very, very crudely articulated.
Yeah. But very cool. And I would, initially think, oh, this is my Emerald Herald, this is my Candle Maiden. But it's, since she doesn't say anything, like I also thought I was still in tutorial mode.
Yeah. And you can kind of walk around in this place and kind of get a tour. I love the aesthetics of this.
Yeah.
There's the whole way that this is put together is this awesome combination of like outdoorsy and woodsy and surreal and dreamlike. When you look off in the distance, I was happy that they put the arch trees in there. Those like nondescript pillars that look like the backdrop of a Beksinski painting, because that's one of my favorite images from the Mainline Souls series, and the fact that I get to see that every time I warp back to my hub was great. Seeing these what would appear to be topless tree trunks rising from the mist below.
Yeah, and if you kind of take the long way around, there's kind of a long looping path that gives you more tutorial messages. But obviously, I just did that because whenever a Souls game asks me to do something, I do the opposite of it. Because usually there's a nameless soldier soul there, and I gotta have it. But if you head towards the building, there are very different kind of messengers that are holding up weapons, and this is your weapon choice for the game, and this is really huge.
Yeah,
this is a really big deal. Yeah. It is more important than your background. This is the biggest thing that's going to determine your real fighting style, because you have so little opportunity to change this for so long.
And, I didn't especially get enough of the badges to buy a lot of gear. Do we know if it's possible to, like, if I pick the saw cleaver, buy the threaded cane, or are you just kind of like locked out of those other play styles entirely?
You can buy them actually really early.
Oh, yeah?
The badge that gives you access to buy the other tutorial weapons from the merchant here comes pretty quick.
Wah, wah. Okay.
That's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Like the game doesn't, the way, I didn't want to switch weapons at all in this game, really, because it's so long before you get a new one. Like, I think that the game does kind of encourage, like, rocking your initial weapons. And part of that is because they're all really viable.
Yeah.
So let's talk about them.
Yeah. So the saw cleaver, it's kind of a way to switch from a long sword to a short sword. And this is the one that I picked because of the Ryu effect. If they put it on the front of the box, then that is probably one of the ways that they kind of designed to play it. So I got this, and I was very satisfied with it pretty much up until I got the weapon that I was going to spend the rest of the game playing. And they even kind of like give a nod to the idea of this being kind of the canonical version of the hunter's weapon. They say it's a symbol of the hunt, and they give a little bit of flavor text, which I'm not sure if it has a mechanical effect, because they say it grows in effectiveness the more transformed the beast.
Yeah, who knows? The weird thing about this is it doesn't look like a weapon. It looks like a piece of medical equipment. It looks like an old-time bone saw. Yeah, to me, which is really cool. The Hunter's Axe, which is what I ended up picking because I was going to play a strength build. And it was the one, like, these have very minimal scaling, but it was the one with the favored strength, is a short hand axe that turns into a halberd, which I'm still using it, my New Game Plus character. I found two other weapons that I like, but this does more damage. And it has reach that I became very dependent on. As we, one of the things we talked about in the combat, or maybe we glossed over, but it is so important to get the first strike. In Bloodborne, and because of that stagger rule, and being able to be a several tumbo widths away, and still stagger an enemy was really important. Yeah,
I can't make a joke out of this, but I'm just going to throw it in here anyway. The Legend of Stagger Vance, which I assume is a is a frat comedy about
about Stagger Lee's son.
Yes.
But father, I don't want to be a killer. I want to go to Vensworth. I was trying to come up with an Ivy League school name. I know we're in the city here with Vensworth.
Yeah, to study
father,
air
I don't
conditioning.
Want to be like you, Stagger Lee.
But the axe is kind of it's the only one of these starting weapons that goes from a one-handed to a weapon to a two-handed weapon. In a game that otherwise, for a lot of the weapons, encourages you to have your torch or your gun in your offhand.
Yep. And then finally, the threaded cane, which is essentially the puzzling stone sword.
Yeah.
From Dark Souls 2. And I started a character that I wanted to have be a skill-based character and use this thing. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's very good. Like, it's not powerful enough, and everything in its transform trick form, like whip form, takes too long to hit, and is too likely to hit the walls next to me.
Yeah.
So I had a really hard time making good use of its trick form.
Yep. I also started a character for with that one as well. I ran into a little bit of that, but I'm kind of seeing some advantages to it, at the very least, as a way to take advantage of high skill at the start.
I think what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to restart this character that is playing along with the show and try an arcane build.
Yeah.
Or a blood tinge build, and then just pick the saw cleaver so I can try that instead.
Yeah.
Because that's a quality weapon. And we didn't talk about this, but the threaded cane is a dex weapon or skill weapon. The axe is a strength weapon, and the saw cleaver is a quality or equal weapon.
Yeah. Quality being it scales with both strength and skill or dexterity.
Yep.
For anybody who's not aware of those different kinds of builds from the earlier games. There's further lore around the axe. It says, people pick this when they want to play the part of the executioner, kind of lean into the bestial, brutal side of this. And the threaded cane is more for people who want to hold on to scraps of civilization to help ensure that the bloodlust of the hunt won't encroach on the soul.
Yeah, I'd be curious if these actually, I've never noticed if these had an effect on your beasthood stat or how that plays out, because it certainly sounds like it does.
Yeah.
Based on those descriptions.
It would have to extend to other weapons. Otherwise, like this first choice, it's almost like Eternal Darkness. Where it's having an effect on something that you can't really see and don't know is a big choice until well after you've made it.
Yeah. The second messenger gives you your sidearm, which is either a blunderbuss or a pistol. The blunderbuss has shorter range but a wider arc.
Yeah.
And the pistol is a little bit faster. And keep in mind, like, you're not using these to shoot things; you're using them to draw aggro in the worst of situations, but for the most part, to parry.
Yeah.
So there are arguments for both. One of them is a little bit of a quicker parry. The other one, you can be a little bit off center.
Yeah.
And still score the parry.
Yeah. So I chose the blunderbuss my first time through. I'm trying the pistol, just for flavor. But
Me too.
New guns are even fewer and farther between than new melee weapons.
And more situational.
Yeah.
Than the weapons are. Like, there are guns that, like, I just, like, why would I, unless I'm planning a build around it, why would I use the cannon?
Yeah, they're utilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The third messenger gives you a notebook, which allows you to send messages to other worlds.
Yeah, and also rate messages as well. So if you leave an especially good note, people will rate it fine or foul, which if you're rated fine, it'll give you a little bit of a health boost.
Is it only if your motor is rated fine, or is it if your note is rated foul as well?
I only get notifications and health ups when people rate my note fine. That could mean that nobody has rated it foul, but I'm not.
Or does it say what it rates it, or does it just say your note was rated?
It says your note was rated fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I like the idea of, like, people rewarding you for doing things that people don't like as well.
It just turns into YouTube, where a down thumb is the same as an up thumb in terms of how people actually get paid. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck you.
Yeah. The thinking just being, like, if you're an especially good trickster, like, you've at least made an impact.
Yeah. Well, in that case, like, if there's an especially good one, I will rate it fine because if it led me astray.
If it's actually funny, yeah.
Yeah, because I appreciate a good pranksman.
And if you just put a illusory wall in front of a blank wall spot, fuck you, because that's not clever.
It's not.
Those only exist in Chalice dungeons, dick.
Yeah,
I spent the whole game looking for those.
I'm playing Scholar of the First Sin now, because I just came out here recently. So, like, people rushed out in force to, like, put up the normal stuff, including, like, illusory wall, like, in corners and stuff, and horribly misogynist shit in front of female people. So yeah,
but a lot of the stuff that they put up actually did do a good job of warning me about changes and things, which is kind of cool. Like, nice. I played it fairly early, and people did a lot of good stuff, which I was into.
Nice.
Yeah. So the doors to this building are locked for now. So you can't get in there yet. You see the ritual altars, which is how we're going to get into Chalice dungeons. You see the headstones, which are how we're going to teleport.
Yeah, those are like archstones from Demon Souls.
Yep.
Yep. Over behind the building, there are these two different kinds of messengers that come into play later. Nightmare messengers, which you can trade insight at for particular items like expensive consumables, or that's also where you buy your bells, but that is not until much later. And then also stump messengers, where you can dress your messengers up.
Yeah. Yeah, which is real cute. And just a minor correction, just so people don't call you out. The nightmare messengers are in front of the house.
Okay.
Not behind the house. And I didn't actually discover these guys until New Game Plus.
Oh, yeah?
In which they take away all your messenger items, so I haven't used these things yet.
I gave my guys top hats. It was delightful.
I wanted to. I didn't think that you could get behind there. Like, I put down a note for everyone else. Like, reeks of hidden path.
Nice.
It's a fine note. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get the rest of your tutorials. Oh, and there's actually just a regular messenger as well.
Yes.
Down front, or a regular merchant.
The bath, the bath messenger. So when people say go to the bath, they're not telling you to up your hygiene game. They're saying go buy the normal guys. And like different, you pick up plot items that open up new items from that guy. So you're not going to different merchants to buy different things.
Yes, like badges are kind of what this game has instead of boss souls a lot of the time, and those are like licenses to buy things, almost like Final Fantasy 12.
Down the hill past the pro tip pit, there's a gate that you can't open up that just bedeviled me the whole game.
Yeah,
that looks out over a flowery field with a massive tree, but not till later.
Well, there's weird messages because there's like locked or does not open or closed by a device, and this one just says does not open. I think, and what that means is does not open yet.
Right.
So you go to that first headstone and you return to Yarnum by Awaken at Lamp, and you're back to Yosefka's clinic, part 2, for fucking vengeance.
So which is the dream and which is reality?
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah,
I don't.
So there's some subtle changes here. You're awakening in one of like the small like vestibule rooms with a lamp that wasn't there before. And also, if you attempt to go back up the stairs, which I didn't do this until new game, so I've attempted to go back up the stairs to the clinic room where you awakened. You can't actually go in there. The door has been closed and barred, and the glass has been kind of boarded over, so you can't see in. And there's a woman on the other side who is taking care of people in there, apparently. And
that's Yosefka Yosefska.
Yeah, the titular Yosefka.
Yosefka, thank you.
Yeah, and she's in there. Taking care of people, and she doesn't want you in because hunters apparently carry the taint.
Yes, and we're going to talk about her. Like she is a major NPC, but we're going to talk about her later.
Yeah,
because you're limited in what you can do with her. Yeah.
Right now, you can go up there, and she hands you kind of these nice healing items, very effective items called Yosefka's blood.
She just gives you some of her blood, which is kind of weird, and that acts as kind of a like divine blessing. Like it heals you a lot, but you can only carry one of them with you at a time. One interesting thing is that the window behind her is boarded up, but you can see in there. And it's worth looking. So whenever you interact with this person, head back and take a look. So you head down the stairs, and there's old Wolfie. Not only just the dog in Terminator 2, but also a werewolf. But
few people know that the dog they used was a lycanthrope in Terminator 2.
Was a blood wolf.
Yep. He was sent back after they developed the technology.
Yeah, and then Arnold Schwarzenegger broke both his knees.
Yep.
And
really sad.
Yeah. But now you can kill him.
Yeah, he's got a third health. I like to think that he was starving out because he had eaten all of the mutated corpses. Like if you look at them, they're really unsettling because their proportions are off.
Yeah. Yep. And it's easy to kill him, and it feels good to do so here. And you head out through. He gives you some blood vials and kind of signals to you how you're going to be catching those consumables. And you head out the front door, and it is a beautiful city. You emerge into a graveyard.
Yeah, under a blood red sky.
Yes.
Yeah, it's fair. Which I have to question the wisdom of the city planning here to put a graveyard right outside of a doctor's office.
It's like somebody was playing Sim City or like a city building game and just wanted the least amount of like travel and transit. Like you literally need to be able to dump out the corpses out the window.
Yep, out the corpse chute.
Yeah, but yeah. So this is your introduction a little bit to
Yarnum.
Yeah, which we're going to be talking about in more detail next episode, of course.
Yeah.
But you do get a little bit of your your set dressing. So tons of statues.
Yeah.
The statues are really interesting. Take a look at them. They all have occluded faces.
Yep.
And occluded eyes, which is going to be very important.
There's also some kind of like cluttering and sweetening of the set in terms of corpses and things, like right outside the rickety front gates that you also open up to see this massive bridge ahead of you over the skyline that stretches as far as the eye can see. Wonderful view. You see a dead horse coming back at you strong from Demon Souls.
Yeah, dead horses are back, baby.
Yep, a dead fly-ridden horse that is collapsed in front of his stagecoach as though there was a desperate and ill-considered flight to the clinic itself, but they were denied entrance, and also loads and loads of coffins.
Yeah. So we'll talk about those two things. Like one, like we know it's a Demon Souls world because there are horses, for Christ's sake. That's not true. But so one thing is there are top hats as well. And they stand out, and I was like, "Oh, the first boss is going to be some kind of fucking like top hat, like some kind of like Shovel Knight-esque hatter character." Because
the Mad Hater.
initially you run into like 3 top hats, and they just they stand out so much, and then you stop running into top hats. But initially, there's just top hats on the floor everywhere, and they're bigger than your hat would be. I was like, "Oh, these have to be." But another thing, so one of the delusions I'm laboring under right now about Bloodborne doing a lot to set up a thing to undermine it on purpose is these coffins, because these coffins have locks on the outside.
Yeah, they're chained up.
Yeah, these are coffins to keep things in. And a curse where people resurrect from the dead has happened in every Souls game. It doesn't happen here.
Right.
There's not an in-game explanation for why your enemies respawn.
There's not an explanation for why you wake up respawn, aside from the fact that they're playing with the whole dream narrative.
Well, or that you have the hunter's mark. Yeah. Like you were going to die from that wolf, but every time you're about to die, Gehrman,
you're
draws you back.
Yeah. But that's not explicitly stated.
Yeah, that's just my thought. But that's a big part of every other Souls game is this curse. Here, when I first saw coffins with chains on the outside, I was like, okay, I'm comfortable with this. But that's not what they're doing. And it's really clever. Like it is a really, really clever visual signpost, because they know that people who are into the Souls games are going to be like digging through this stuff, with attention to detail. And it's just there to, I can't think of an in-universe reason why there are locks on the outside of coffins. I can think of that kind of game authorial reason, and that's why. Yeah. So.
Yep. Just to give you the sense of foreboding. I mean, and this is something this is the first game I've had a PS4 for a little while, at least since last winter. And this is the first really good case for this extra horsepower. Right. We said it in the first impressions cast a little bit, but if you didn't listen to that, there is so much detail that they put into this, both in the encounter design and kind of in the world, the visual detail, the sweetening, the set dressing, that probably wouldn't have been as possible this time. So, I'm going to be playing through, making the notes for this show with a much closer eye towards details like this, just because everything is there and it feels like it's there for a reason aside from just looking cool.
Yeah. Contrast this with, even though I remember kind of liking it, I feel like such a fool. Contrast it with when you get into the cathedral in Lords of the Fallen and like everything, there's just a bunch of scattered garbage everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's not evocative and it's not neat. This is the way to do that right.
Yeah.
It's very, very cool.
Or contrast this with the astrolabes and Sens.
Yeah, or I guess that's true. Like, which are origins, like Sen.
Oh no, the astrolabes are in Dukes. It's the statues that are in Sens.
Yeah, the statue storage, Sen statue storage warehouse. This is better than that. It's better than any Souls game has done that. So you run into your first enemy who's hanging out, kind of hiding, and you fight them, and they're essentially, they are hollows mechanically, but actually they're villagers.
Yeah, they're frenzied villagers carrying torches in something that tells you, yes, this is going to be Resident Evil 4 for a good long while.
Yes. Yeah, the Resident Evil 4 parallels continue for quite a bit. None of them are that hard. You don't encounter very many of them in this initial area that we're talking about. But, you can take them out. And the big thing you're doing here is pulling a lever to get up a ladder. And as you do, you hear a wheezing moan, which is the first boss of the game. It's kind of a little bit of foreshadowing. And there's another lamp, which shortcuts will never be this close together again. And or lamps. Yep. And you can use this to go back to Hunter's Dream, which we're going to talk about that a little bit more. And then that'll be that for this episode.
Right. Yep. So you go back to the Hunter's Dream, and the biggest thing that has changed is the fact that, you're hearing music this time, which you weren't before.
Yep.
And also the workshop itself is open, and you meet a very important NPC, Gehrman, who calls himself a friend of the Hunters.
Yes, and I'll go ahead and just cut in his dialogue here, because it's very good.
You must be the new hunter. Welcome to the Hunter's Dream. This will be your home for now. I am Gammon. Friend to you hunters. You're sure to be in a fine haze about now, but don't think too hard about all of this. Just go out and kill a few beasts. It's for your own good. You know, it's just what hunters do. You'll get used to it. This was once a safe haven for hunters. A workshop where hunters used blood to enhance their weapons and flesh. We don't have as many tools as we once did, but you're welcome to use whatever you find. Even the dog, should it please you.
Yeah. So other than that last creepy bit that he says, I really like German's dialogue.
I love the way he delivers that, though. Like that caught me off guard, and as much as I find that objectionable, that feels like the point to me. And you know, for as gross and depraved as that is, it is a wonderful detail that even puts me off of considering the hunter's dream to be a safe place.
I like that part of it. That kind of there's no thing in the Souls games prior to this that dealt with that kind of sexuality in any way, and this kind of like it felt weird to me. Like, people in Souls games don't nut. Like, they don't like this. Like, they don't. There's nobody needs to fuck a doll in these games. Like, it is too. You got other things on your mind, man.
Yeah.
You know, and it felt more at home with a different type of game, which is, again, like, to your point, like, if that's the point, that's great. Like, I get it. I can see that. But it also just kind of rubbed me a weird way.
Yeah.
So
the fact that it did cross a line was satisfying enough to me, even though I do understand the implications behind it and everything, like that are gross. But I see what you're saying. I feel like it traded something expensive for something that had a positive effect on the experience for me, just by making me feel skeezed out as fuck.
Yeah, it's not worthless. It's not arbitrary. It just kind of like, I didn't need to know that Gehrman fucked this doll. Like, I don't know. I mean, that's really all there is to it. I was like, I didn't need to know this about these characters. Like, okay. But really what this is, this workshop, is your upgrade station. Other than just leveling up through the doll, who is not active yet. We should note. That has not happened. So we can't use the doll if it should please us.
And won't be for a good long while.
Yeah. But yeah, so there's a couple different things here. There's the memory altar, the hunter's workshop, and your storage bin.
The memory altar doesn't come alive until later in the game when you find a key item. The hunter's workshop is where you can trade in like frozen solidified blood. And the storage is pretty great because at least for blood vials and bullets, anything that you collect over and above what you can hold is automatically replenished. And even for other consumables that you have, like a soft max on for carrying around and using, everything overflows into this. So it is a conscientious design that is made a little bit less conscientious because of the loading that you have to do to get here. But as long as you're in the neighborhood, you can pop by.
Yeah, or if you don't quite have enough souls to level up, just buy some blood. Store your larder, so to speak.
So we haven't really addressed kind of the substance of what Gehrman says, though, because it's pretty much the only direction that you have so far, along with the note that you found back in the clinic saying seek pale blood to transcend the hunt. That's there next to where you wake up, and Gehrman basically just says, "Hey, don't think about this too much. You're probably overwhelmed by this, but all you need to do is kill because hunters hunt."
That's the thing. I mean, we didn't go over it very much, but that is because it is partly because it is so purposely vague. Like, it's got a real, you'll stand in front of Drangleic and not know why sense to it. Like, just don't worry about it. Go do this thing. That is a gameplay thing. Which is very interesting. Like, this is like a year in the future when we talk about this stuff, but I think that we're gonna have a lot to say just about how Bloodborne tells its story and how it is different. Giving you so little information up front helps square the circle with how straightforward I think the story actually is. Once you kind of have the pieces. which is cool, but it is something we're not used to at all. And I will admit was really off-putting. Like being 10 hours into Bloodborne and not knowing why I was doing anything was kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
This is a big contributor to that.
Yeah.
And the game is aware of it. It's underlying the fact that it's not an accident. It is the character literally saying, just go do it.
Yeah.
Stop questioning it.
It feels so confrontational too. Confrontational in a way that the other kind of initial encounters with plot givers does not feel, even with the Crestfallen, right? Who was more just dismissive of your ability because he had walked that path and failed, prior to that, just directly saying, hey, don't think too hard about this. Felt like a challenge to me because I'm going to think hard about this.
Yeah. Have you heard of a little podcast called Bonfireside Chat?
I'm not even making that appeal. Like, just, Tiger got to hunt, fish got to fly, Cole got to sit and wonder why, right?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't necessarily have to do with, but obviously we are going to think about it.
But even for a regular player, like, it's condescending. It's saying, don't worry your pretty little head. Just do this thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's it for what we're covering now.
Yeah. There's a message inside: to escape this dreadful hunter's dream, halt the source of this spreading scourge of beasts, lest this night carry on forever.
Yes. Which again is also a little bit of a direction thing, but that in light of what we learned is a little too little. Yeah. So next time we're going to be talking about the first portion of Central Yharnam, up through the first boss. It is geographically not a huge space, but contains multitudes.
Yep.
And we'll be joined by Vadividya.
Yes, this is a huge deal.
Yeah, big request for the show. Very nice guy. We're very happy to have him. Something that we haven't talked about a lot, but really informative of the show as well. Like we both, like you said, we both are driven to kind of tear apart this stuff. But his early Prepare to Cry stuff really did unlock some ways of thinking about these games for me. And he still remains kind of the premier lore guy. Yeah. And I'm really happy to have him on this first area where we can kind of talk a little bit about the generalities of what's happening to Yharnam. So if you want to, that's the lore stuff we're going to cover. Yeah, I think primarily.
So if you have responses about that first area up through the first boss of the game here, you can send those in. You can go to Duckfeed.tv/contact. There's a button there that says Bonfireside Chat. And you can write in there with your subject line and everything. This is primarily for the benefit of new listeners. We've already gotten the responses for this area. If you have any corrections for us, those go in there as well. We will try our best to get into those. I also want to let people know brief answers have a better chance of getting in, or brief responses. And, we will do some editing on those just if, to raise a salient point. So just anybody who is going to be writing in, keep those things in mind. Just so when you hear this, you say, wait, there was a whole thing that's because of length and time and stuff.
I'll refine that a little bit further and say more so, or not maybe more so, but alongside with being brief, it's also important to, it's like, we know you like the game. So that kind of stuff is not necessarily important. So concrete examples, theories and questions are probably the best things. Just kind of effusive praise is more likely to get cut down or cut entirely, and that's not a function of us not appreciating your engagement. Yeah, it's just a function of time. So, specifically salient things that you have to say about the area in question or the characters in question. Good, man, I love this game. Good, but not necessarily for this.
Yeah. So, you can save everybody some time and put that in there. We do definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, and go talk to us on Facebook about that. Yeah, because we'll talk on Facebook and gush about the game. If you go to facebook.com/bonfireside chat, we have a very active community. Tons of people post there and post videos of their harrowing boss wins and cool stuff they found on YouTube. And we try to do the same thing. It's a really cool place, and we recommend you hang out there.
Yeah, it's a great place for Souls news, and hopefully, this can always go away, but it is a very positive environment, I think. And it is a cool place to be.
I think so as well. Since we are starting a new season on a new game, this is a really critical time for the show. If you know people who like Bloodborne, hook them up. Yeah. Let them know, that we exist and we are doing what we do. That we really appreciate that. That's the biggest thing for us. More than supporting us in other concrete ways, probably just as good or better as telling a friend about it. And every time we hear, somebody writes a review or says something like, "Hey, I heard about you from this person," that always makes us feel good. And we really appreciate you guys doing that.
Yeah. Kind of alongside that, if you're looking to do a little bit extra, this is a big time for iTunes ratings and reviews as well. People have kind of come out and put in some ratings on the Bloodborne content we put out so far, and I've already heard from people who have kind of found us that way. We're up there in the rankings, but we want to stay that way. So if you are in the Apple ecosystem and you don't mind leaving us a rating or review, that is really appreciated to go there and kind of let people know what to expect from this. I feel kind of weird asking this. If there's anything like super critical, like stuff that you would like us to change, that is probably better addressed in a conversation with us through the contact form, and we'll engage you with that there. But rate us honestly and put that stuff up there. Good.
If you want to be engaged,
yes.
Like we're not saying like only go do this if you like us. Like be honest, you can engage with iTunes however you want. If you actually want to talk about it, we're open to talking about shit. I essentially like the elephant in the room what we're talking about is people get mad because we'll bring up social justice stuff, which my feelings on that is kind of silly. But if a better way, if you actually want to talk about it, we don't do anything like on accident. I have well-considered reasons for why I include something in the show versus why I don't. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody about that. So it just feels kind of punitive to be like, you guys are idiots. That feels punitive and not useful construction or useful criticism. Yeah. So if it's just not for you, that's fine. You can write a negative review. That's quite all right. But if you actually want to have a conversation, we're available to do it. And hopefully we built up enough trust to where you don't think that we're doing things because we don't give a shit. We may not agree with you, but everything we include in the show is on purpose. Or at least is considered. It maybe isn't something we've agonized over, but it's something we're comfortable having on there. So
yeah.
I'm not trying to like talk over you or anything like that. But.
No, that's perfectly fine. You added into it. At the end of the day, we're two dudes with microphones, and we're going to talk about things. It's going to seep into it. So if if there are new listeners, who are kind of seeing that, hopefully that provides a little bit of context, and hopefully it doesn't get in the way of the primary points that we're trying to make about the game.
Well, and also, I mean, more than that, like the primary. Hopefully, this episode, if you are new to the show. The primary appeal of the show is not just literally like us reading wiki.bloodborne. So hopefully you want us to talk about Kenneth Branagh's dick. And along with that, the kind of people who are going to talk about Kenneth Branagh's dick might also say something like, false rape accusations are statistically insignificant, so much so that you shouldn't even bring them up. That might happen. So if
Gary, that's ridiculous. Kenneth Branagh doesn't have a dick. We established that.
Yeah, he's missing it. Well, he has a spider for a dick.
Yep.
I think he's got a vacuum.
I'm kind of confused.
So yeah, that's my point is that you don't have to agree with us on everything, but we're gonna digress, and that's what the show is. If that's not for you, okay. Yep. If it is for you, if you know people it is for, hook them up.
Yeah. And if it is for you and you're interested in other stuff, if you're only aware of this particular show, we are part of a network, Duckfeed.tv. The other kind of like big show that we do is Watch Out for Fireballs. It is a retro video games book club kind of show where we go through and play games and talk about them at length, probably in a less zoomed out view than we have here with this. But that is one
more zoomed out.
Yes. Yeah, more zoomed out. There we go. Wow. How could it be any more zoomed in?
Yeah, less zoomed out.
Yep.
Like on this episode, we're going to talk 90 minutes about, about the spread gun.
Yep. Yeah. But there are other shows there too, about games and comedy and things like that. And all of those can be found at Duckfeed.tv.
And finally, if you're feeling super generous, you can go to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv and kick us a couple bucks a month. You get the shows a day early, you get some cool rewards, and also you get the good feeling that comes with supporting people who are doing things that you like. And for everybody who's already doing that, my immense thank you. Yeah. People have been coming out in force. We're very close to getting our next milestone goal, which is important for this show specifically because this is the show that we most often have guests, and that will enable us to buy some equipment that will make those guests sound better.
Exactly. So go there and check it out. We are only able to do these shows because of your guys' support, both monetary and word of mouth, getting the stuff out there. And we're super excited to be approaching this new season of this show. It is tremendous fun to do. I've seen some of the guests that we're going to have. This is a wonderful time for the network, for the show, for me personally, and for Gary and myself. So
yeah. Yep, absolutely. So until next time, Cole, what did we decide on having them do?
Well, just remember, a hunter's never alone.
Yep, hunter is never alone.
Umbasa.
Umbasa. Umbasa still works.
And we all pray that we will have far more soon